All right, folks, history was made today. The most powerful man in the world made an extraordinary and unprecedented display of solidarity with America's working class in a moment of profound need and profound political risk. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. Here's the situation, folks. The United Auto Workers, one of the biggest and most diverse unions in the history of the United States, has been making targeted strikes against major automotive manufacturers, including General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, which is the parent company of Chrysler. And they've been doing this for about a month in parallel to that other major strike going on in California in particular, the writer's strike. Now, what the UAW wants are reasonable concessions, okay? Basically, they're saying, listen, CEOs in the C-suite of the big automotive manufacturing companies, they've been receiving extraordinary pay increases. So the workers themselves should also get wage increases. We should also have shorter work weeks. And we should, generally speaking, have job security as the automotive manufacturing industry transitions into electric vehicles. All of these things are eminently reasonable. And yet the strike has persisted and has actually increased for about the past month. Now, Shawn Fain, who is the president of this union, the UAW, he actually issued a public invitation for President Biden to join the UAW at a picket line.
We invite and encourage everyone who supports our cause to join us on the picket line, from our friends and families all the way up to the President of the United States. We invite you to join us in our fight. The way you can help is to build our movement and show the companies that the public stands with us and stands with our elected national negotiators.
So this was a brilliant move on Fain's part, especially since President Biden has long boasted, understandably so, rightfully so, justifiably so, as being the most pro-union and pro-labor president in modern U.S. history at the bare minimum, which he is. Now, President Biden actually publicly accepted this invitation, which in and of itself is historic, but we'll get to that in just a second. I also want to point out how Shawn Fain reacted to Donald Trump. Here he extends a public invitation to President Biden. Hey, come join us. Lend your executive and moral authority as the President of the United States. Help legitimize our movement. And yet when Donald Trump announced that he would be showing up on Wednesday to Detroit, presumably to reach out to strikers in the automotive industry, this is what Shawn Fain had to say. Every fiber of our union is being poured into fighting the billionaire class and an economy that enriches people like Donald Trump at the expense of workers. We can't keep electing billionaires and millionaires that don't have any understanding of what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck and struggle to get by and expecting them to solve the problems of the working class. So I don't know if Donald Trump was irrationally expecting the endorsement of the UAW, but it sounds like he's not going to get it. However, we do have a pro-union president, Joe Biden, who's running for re-election, and he accepted the invitation. And for the first time in the history of this country, a sitting president stood up and stood shoulder to shoulder, with striking workers. And I want to play some remarks from the president.
I marched along the UAW picket lines when I was a senator since 1973, but I tell you what, first time I've ever done it as a president. Oh, sure. One thing is real simple, and to be very brief. The fact of the matter is that you guys, the UAW, you saved the automobile industry back in 2008 and before. Made a lot of sacrifices, gave up a lot, and the companies were in trouble. But now they're doing incredibly well. And guess what? You should be doing incredibly well too. The simple problem. Stick with it, because you deserve the significant raise you need and other benefits.
Let's get it!
Let's get back what we lost, okay? Yeah! We say them, it's about time them to step up for us. Now, there's a guy I know you don't know here.
And then he passes the bullhorn to Shawn Fain. Now we're going to place some remarks there as too, because Shawn Fain rightly points out the importance of this moment, the unprecedented nature of this moment.
You know, this is a historic moment. The first time in our country's history that a sitting USA president has came out and stood on the picket line. Our president has chosen to stand up with workers in our fight for economic and social justice. Thank you. It's a historic day and a historic moment in time. You know, this.
So, He's right. This is historic. I don't know if any other president has been invited to join a picket line at any other point, but as far as I know, this has never happened in U.S. history where if an invitation was offered, it was accepted. Now, the reason for this is because Joe Biden is in a precarious position. Any president would be, okay? Because even if you're a liberal or progressive or pro-union president, which Joe Biden is, at least relatively speaking, he has to walk a tightrope because he has to balance those interactions while also not putting his thumb on the scale or being seen as putting his thumb on the scale during the negotiations between the automotive industry and the workers. Besides that, he also has to be sensitive to potential economic fallout that may ensue from disrupted negotiations or protracted negotiations or a successful strike. And even though I'm progressive and even though I'm pro-union, we do have to acknowledge that there could be indeed macroeconomic consequences. That's the whole point of the strike. They're leveraging that, even if it's completely morally justified. That's the leverage, okay? And yet, despite the risks, despite the fact that he's neck and neck with Donald Trump in the polling, despite all the political headwinds that Joe Biden is experiencing, he did the right thing and showed up for the workers anyway. So this is huge. It's huge. Now, the last thing I want to do is play some final remarks by Fain, and then Biden grabs the bullhorn again, and then we're going to quickly break down exactly what the UAW wants in terms of like particular demands. I gave like a general overview at the beginning, but I think it's worth revisiting a bit more detailed.
And so today I just want to take a moment to stand with all of you, with our president, and say thank you to the president. Thank you, Mr. President, for coming. Thank you for coming to stand up with us in our generation's defining moments. And we know the president will do right by the working class. And when we do right by the working class, you can leave the rest to us because we're going to take care of this business. So thank you for coming out. Thank you for being a part of this fight. And let's get back to winning solidarity for all of our members and economic and social justice for all of our members.
Heard me say it many times. Wall Street didn't build the country. The middle class built the country. Unions built the middle class. That's a fact. So let's keep going. You deserve what you've earned, and you've earned a hell of a lot more than you're getting paid now. Thank you very much.
So again, this is historic, folks. This is huge. The UAW has not officially, well, they didn't, as of this morning, have not officially endorsed any particular candidate. Shawn Fain was asked about this a couple of weeks ago. And he was very, bullish about it. He was like, listen, Joe Biden's done some good things, but I'm reserving my endorsement yet because I think there's more to be done. I would not be surprised if at the end of this, President Biden has a formal endorsement from Shawn Fain in the UAW. I'd be shocked if not. Now, I do want to, NPR has a great breakdown of some of the particular demands. I'm going to throw my glasses on so I can read them. That the UAW is looking for. A wage increase of about 40%. Wages are, for obvious reason, the biggest sticking point in ongoing talks for a contract. They're pushing for a roughly 40% general wage increase for its members over the length of a 4-year contract, pointing to automotive makers' recent profits. Collectively, the three companies, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, again, that parent company for Chrysler, posted a profit of $21 billion in just the first half of this year. So far, the companies have offered pay raises of approximately 20%, a jump from their opening bids, but still only half of what the union sees as adequate. The pay hike demands are being driven in part of the success of other unions, including UPS and American Airlines, have had in getting this year. So the UAW is looking at unions in other industries as well as kind of a measuring stick. So reinstating cost of living protections. Auto workers also gave up cost of living adjustments, or COLA, as part of the concessions during the 2008 financial crisis when the federal government had to bail out the automotive industry. And that's what President Biden was referring to earlier in the clip when he's saying you all had to give up so much for the automotive industry, which is true. These workers who are heavily disadvantaged compared to the C-suite, the executives of these companies, right? They gave up as part of the negotiations. They put skin in the game. They gave their pound of flesh. And now they're expecting, understandably so, that the C-suite give up some of the surplus profits that they've been benefiting from in return. So they're pushing for the reinstatement of cost of living protections that were sacrificed in 2008. Ending the two-tier system for wages and benefits. A handful of the UAW's demands are intended to level the playing field for new hires. Okay, so that's the other thing too. So much of the protections and benefits associated with UAW members aren't afforded to new hires. You basically have to gain a level of seniority and tenure before you benefit from various from aspects of employment in the automotive industry. Since the 2007 union concessions, new workers have been paid less than veteran employees to do the same job. Okay, so they're saying that has to end. And then the last one was job security, again, in that EV transition. Looming over the UAW's negotiations this year is the transition to electric vehicles, an industry-wide shift that, from the union's perspective, underscores the need for strong protection for workers, understandably so. They want a guaranteed right to strike over plant closures and some form of compensation in the event of a shutdown of a plant. All of these things are eminently reasonable, and I would encourage you to check out this NPR article, which goes into more length. But again, folks, this is huge. What President Biden did was the right thing at enormous political risk in a perilous moment for his presidency, for his reelection campaign, when you have an entire party of bad faith Republicans gunning for you, looking over everything you do and trying to interpret it in the least flattering, most bad faith light. He accepted the invitation and did the right thing. So my hope from this is that Shawn Fain and the UAW will recognize, especially when you compare it to, the only other viable alternatives for the White House, which is a Republican, which is Donald Trump. And Shawn Fain and the UAW will be like, you know what? When you compare this, or when you add this to the NLRB, the Biden NLRB decisions that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, which make it infinitely easier to unionize and make it infinitely harder for companies to union bust. When you look at the Biden administration's their changes to compensation, in which I think it's like 3.5 million additional workers in the United States get to be paid additional overtime. When you combine all these things, given the precarious political position, Shawn Fain and the UAW will be like, you know what? Biden has done his best for workers, for labor, and for unions in this country. We need to endorse him. We need to endorse him enthusiastically. We need to get him reelected in 2024. We need to expand the Democratic majority in the House with progressives who are willing to make changes that are also pro-worker, pro-union, pro-labor, and then retake the House as well. We need to get Biden a trifecta as much as possible with aggressive progressives, and I think this is a solid step in that direction.